Good afternoon, everybody. So this is the first of our Land at Lunch webinar series, and this webinar is about the updated Land Rights and Responsibilities Statement. This Land at Lunch series is a new approach to us for doing webinars, and the idea is that they're a bit more friendly, a bit more conversational, and we're really looking forward to hearing from everybody in the chat and the Q&A boxes today. We're going to finish at 12:45, and you are all welcome, as we said in the invite, to have your lunch, take a walk, just listen to this while you're having a stroll, whatever suits for you. The idea is that it makes our work more accessible. So we're going to talk today about the Land Rights and Responsibility Statement and the recent update to it. We're going to hear, first of all, from the Minister, who is going to explain to us the changes that have been made and why it's important. And then Gemma and I are going to have a bit of a chat about that and draw out some of the key things that we think are important for you all to hear about. And we're going to have a couple of polls throughout the workshop as well, and we'll have a Q&A session coming up too. So please feel free to participate in that as we go along. So I'm going to just briefly introduce Lisa, who is our training coordinator. Give us a wave, Lisa. She's in the screen that you can see on your screen there, and she'll be helping us behind the scenes to make sure that everything runs smoothly. She'll be posting links in the chat. She can answer any questions that you need about housekeeping things. And also we have Gemma here, who is our Land Rights and Responsibilities Manager, and she'll be helping out with discussion about the webinar as we go along. Okay, I'm going to hand over to you, Lisa, first of all, for some housekeeping.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay, hello, and yeah, I'm Lisa. I'm the training coordinator at the Scottish Land Commission. I'm just going to run through a few pieces of information in housekeeping before we start. So, as you saw in our holding slide, today's webinar will be recorded, including the chat and the Q&A. And information on how the recording will be used in our full privacy policy is posting in the chat now, I hope. There we go. Everyone's camera and mic today are off by default, but we welcome your questions in the question and answer box, which you can find at the bottom of your screen, and comments, of course, in the chat box. Questions in the Q&A box can be anonymous if you prefer that, but your screen name is always visible in the chat. In today's session, we also have the option for you to turn on closed captions or have a live transcript. This function is enabled also using the buttons at the bottom of your screen. Look for the CC button on the control panel. We would flag that these captions are auto-generated though, so there may be a few small inaccuracies that are outside of our control. And finally, we're going to be collecting some feedback today throughout the session in the form of 2 short Zoom polls. And we're really grateful for your input into these. So thanks in advance for taking part. The polls are anonymous. We're not sharing the answers with the entire group. They're just for us. And I'm just about to post some info in the chat about how what that data is for and how we use that. But you can always contact our comms team, if you have any questions about that. Okay, so that's all from me. I'm going to disappear and I'm going to hand over to Gemma.
Thanks very much, Lisa. If you have any questions on the housekeeping there, Lisa will be popping some links in the chat, but please feel free to use the chat to answer any questions, ask any questions you have. We are also going to be asking you just now to answer a few short questions for us. This is to help us find out a little bit about you, where you're from, and what capacity you're attending the webinar, what your interest is, and your level of knowledge of what we do at the Commission. So Lisa will be launching the poll, and we'll give you a couple of minutes just to fill those questions out. You will need to scroll down to answer all of those questions. So like we say, we ask who you are, where about you're joining the webinar from, that's your local authority area, and what part of the country are you joining us from today. And we're also interested to know about whether you've attended any of our events before and how familiar you feel you are with good practice in relation to land rights and responsibilities. So we will just give you a couple of minutes there to fill that out, and hopefully Lisa can let me know when we've got a good number of folk responded to those questions.
I think we're nearly there. If anyone for any reason hasn't been able to access the polls today, it could just be to do with some functionality that isn't quite working for you. And if you'd like us to send you a separate survey, that won't be a problem. Just email us on our contact details that we will share later in the session. And apologies for that if it hasn't worked for you. I'm going to end that now.
Thanks very much, Lisa, and thanks everyone for answering those questions for us. As Lisa's mentioned, we'll have another poll later on in the webinar just to gather a bit of feedback from you. And now I will hand over to Emma, who will introduce a video from the Minister.
Thanks, Gemma. And thanks everyone for completing the poll. It's really helpful just to get a bit of information about who's attending so that we can tailor our webinars to the right kind of people. So Màiri McAllan, who is the Minister for Environment and Land Reform, has prepared a short video for us. It's about 10 minutes long, and she just talks us through the Land Rights and Responsibility Statement, the changes that have been made and why they're important. Lisa, you're going to share that video for us just now, I think.
Scotland's land is one of our most valuable assets. It's a vital component of our economy, our environment, and our national culture and identity. When we look after our land, it looks after us. Scotland's land and landscapes can deliver a wide range of social, cultural, economic and environmental benefits, both for local communities and for our nation as a whole. Scottish ministers want to see a strong and dynamic relationship between the people of Scotland and our land, and that in a way that benefits everyone. I believe that people and land are indivisible. We have a strong record of progressive land reform in Scotland, but there is further progress to be made. And I was delighted to be able to publish less than a month ago a revised land rights and responsibilities statement to help address the challenges that we face in contemporary Scotland. I want to thank the Scottish Land Commission for inviting me to speak to you about why I feel this revised statement is important, what it can help us to achieve and how we hope it will guide future change. Because we do need change. Land is a finite resource which must meet a wide range of needs. We're also facing a global climate and nature emergency. Meanwhile, the cost crisis and the aftermath of the pandemic is still affecting us all. Land, thankfully, is an asset which can help us face these challenges. Now, the Land Rights and Responsibilities Statement provides a framework for responsible management of land. When it was first published in 2017, it was the first document of its kind in the world, and I think this is a reflection of Scotland's position as a global leader in land reform. In updating the statement, we have listened very carefully to what people told us in response to the consultation last winter. We've considered what changes need to be made to keep that statement world leading. And the revision has allowed us to consider how it can guide land use and management in the context of the multitude of challenges that we face, to ensure that our land supports a sustainable future for the benefit of all of Scotland's people. The statement is built on a human rights framework and has three aims. Firstly, it informs the development of government policy and action in relation to land. This includes planning, housing provision and urban regeneration, as well as farming and caring for the environment. Secondly, it supports those with responsibilities over land to consider how their decisions can help realise the vision of the statement, that being for a strong and dynamic relationship between our people and our land. Decisions about land ownership, use and management can help address challenges we face as a nation, including housing shortages, inequality and threats to our precious environment. When those who make these decisions consider the vision and the principles of the Land Rights and Responsibilities Statement, they benefit not only their own interests, but those of communities who live and work around them and as Scotland as a whole. Thirdly, the statement encourages all of us to recognise our responsibilities as well as our rights in relation to land. The decisions that we take as individuals, families and businesses can have a significant impact on the land and on the ability of others to use the land for educational, recreational or whatever purpose. The vision of the statement has been changed to include the need to support a just transition to net zero and to add reference to natural capital, to exemplify the importance of the role of our land and our natural environment. And we as Scottish ministers are committed to a just transition, which means meeting our net zero targets in a way that is fair and which is socially just and which delivers benefits for all. To reach net zero, we need sustained action. This includes significant land use change, and I believe that this action must be undertaken in partnership with local communities. It needs to be done with them and for them, not to them. Taking a natural capital approach means viewing land as an asset that can deliver a wide range of social, cultural, economic and environmental benefits. For example, creating new woodlands can sequester carbon while producing timber and wood products. But beyond this, it can improve resilience to flooding and create wildlife corridors to bolster biodiversity. It sustains and provides green jobs and green space for education, tourism and recreation. In response to the responses to the consultation, I added a new principle which states that land ownership, management and use should deliver a wide range of social, environmental, economic and cultural benefits. In Scotland, the mutual dependency of our land, our culture and our people has deep roots. The 19th century saw the passing of legislation to provide security of tenure for crofters and established the first Crofters Commission. The Highland Land League coined the motto, the land, the language, the people. Many years on, this slogan still has value and resonance when considering the relationship between Scotland's cultural richness, including the Gaelic language, and its communities and its land. When making decisions on land, it is key to consider factors beyond those which are economically calculable. The value of land cannot be distilled to its agricultural output or its rate of carbon sequestration. Our land is part of a complex web, both of biodiversity and of social and cultural meaning. The delivery of social, environmental, economic and cultural benefits, these are not mutually exclusive. And I welcome the emphasis in this principle on achieving a wide range of benefits in a mutually inclusive way. The updated statement continues to cover the themes included in the first one, the importance of community engagement, the need for transparency and responsible stewardship, as well as the diversification of land ownership and support for communities to acquire land. In the first 5 years since its publication, we have seen real change come about under the guidance of the statement. The Scottish Land Commission have been key to facilitating this change. Many of those who own and manage land in Scotland are already delivering significant benefits and working successfully with local communities. But this practice is not yet universal. The Scottish Land Commission Good Practice Programme promotes and supports change in the way that land is owned and used in both urban and rural Scotland. It guides individuals and businesses to take decisions in line with the ethos of the statement and encourages voluntary good practice in relation to land and buildings. And this is done through a range of online resources, webinars and direct support to provide guidance to those with rights over land as to its responsible management. A key part of the Good Practice Programme are the Land Rights and Responsibilities Protocols. These set out practical advice on putting the principles of the statement into action, helping landowners, land managers and communities to work together to make better and fairer decisions about land and its use. And while change has already been brought about by the Land Rights and Responsibilities Statement, in the past 5 years since its publication, we have seen shifts in the demands on our land and what we require of it and from it. The work that has supported change under the first statement will continue to support change under the revised version. We're considering how we can further support the implementation and adoption of the statement, which of course applies to urban land as much as it does to rural. In order to make progress on land reform in Scotland and to meet the challenges that we currently face and those which will undoubtedly come in years to come, we need to work in partnership. We don't have time to work in silos. Private land ownership, public bodies, businesses and third sector organisations need to come together, with both communities of place and communities of interest. Land Rights and Responsibilities Statement provides us with a framework of how to make this progress and ensure that our land truly benefits the people of Scotland, all of the people of Scotland.
Thanks to the Minister for sharing that with us. Many of you will already know that the Scottish Land Commission is a non-departmental public body, and we're governed by 5 commissioners and a tenant farming commissioner who are all appointed by ministers. We work very closely with government, and it's a key part of our role to help put the land rights and responsibilities statement into practice, and it guides a lot of the work that the Commission undertakes. My role with the Commission is Head of Land Rights and Responsibilities, and I lead that programme of work to embed the statement in what people are doing. So think about how we can strategically align it with the work of other organisations, help private landowners and public landowners and community landowners and charity landowners and all those kinds of landowners to think about how the statement applies to their work and the things that they can do to put it into practice. So Gemma, you also work really closely with the Land Rights and Responsibilities Statement, and we're going to have a bit of a conversation now reflecting on what the Minister has said. But can you first just start by telling us a little bit about your role with the Commission?
Sure. I'm the Land Rights and Responsibilities Manager at the Commission, so I have been heavily involved in our Good Practice programme since it launched in December 2019. We work in the Good Practice programme really closely with an advisory group and with other stakeholders to develop protocols, guidance, templates, documents that are really, really helpful for landowners, communities, any kind of stakeholders in land, to help them see how the principles of the statement could apply in a practical sense. The Minister mentioned in her statement that we have a programme voluntary good practice that involves these kind of documents, but we also deliver workshops and webinars and training. And another key part of my role is dealing with casework, and we'll touch on that in a little bit, but that's where people feel that they're encountering practice that doesn't quite align with the vision and the principles. So that's my role is really broad-ranging, wide-encompassing role of helping all kinds of people to understand these principles and to put them into practice on a daily basis.
That's great, Gemma. Thank you for that. Can you also remind us how the LRRS first came about? And I know that you've been very closely involved in reviewing the LRRS, the Land Rights and Responsibility Statement. So could you also tell us a little bit about the Commission's role in reviewing the statement, as well as where the statement originally kind of came from?
Sure. So the Land Rights and Responsibility Statement came about as a result of the Land Reform Scotland Act 2016. It was a statutory requirement that the Scottish Government produce a statement, and it is, as the Minister said, a really important document in setting out a human rights approach to the way that we own, use and manage land in Scotland. It was written to the Act that when at a point 5 years from publication of the statement would have to be reviewed to ensure that it was up to date and reflected the context and circumstances in which we currently operate. So the Scottish Land Commission has played a key role from promoting the original statement, which is written into the statement that we are required to have regard to it in the work that we do. And we've also played a role in the review of the statement. So the review was kicked off in December last year with a public consultation, and we have put our own responses into that, and we've really drawn on the evidence from our Good Practice programme and our experience working with all kinds of stakeholders in land over the last few years to inform what we've said there. We also helped write the advisory notes that explain what the principles mean and how they relate to practice, and we've provided some case studies as well. We work really closely with different landowners and communities, and through that we see some fantastic examples of good practice. We've got a great repository of those on our website, and we had some case studies that really reflected good practice in relation to the different principles. So we provided some of them to support the statement.
Yeah, I find the case studies really helpful actually in just kind of articulating what it is that the statement's looking for, because sometimes it can feel a bit high level. And then the protocols that we have as well really kind of express those principles from the LRS in practical terms, and hopefully they're helpful to people. If anyone has any questions about the Land Rights and Responsibilities Statement, then please do put them in the Q&A box. It's at the bottom of your screen, and questions in there can be anonymous if you choose. It's entirely your call as to whether you prefer to do that. And we'll pick them up in just another few minutes, basically. So, Gemma, just one more question for you really at the moment, but who should be interested in the Land Rights and Responsibility Statement? Who does it apply to?
Well, really, the Land Rights and Responsibility Statement applies to everyone. But it is of particular relevance to people who have control of land or who make significant decisions about land and also about buildings. And it's really relevant to all types of landowner and manager, whether that is communities, private rural estates, urban developers or public bodies. And really the statement and the principles should inform the decisions that are made by landowners and managers, by advisors to the land sector and by communities too. So as the Land Rights and Responsibilities Statement has evolved over the years and is becoming more embedded in policy, it's really a helpful indicator of changes to come in public policy and funding, and we would expect to see that people's behaviour is aligned with the Land Rights and Responsibilities Statement. So really it is something that's for everyone. But of course, some types of landowner are likely to be more aware of the statement. We know that through the work that we do in advising and providing guidance and dealing with casework. And that is something that came through in the Land Rights and Responsibilities Statement consultation that was carried out by the Scottish Government earlier this year, that there are varying levels of awareness of the statement. And I think that's a really important thing to consider. And I wonder, Emma, if you have anything you might want to say about how people could help to raise awareness of the statement?
Yeah, of course. And of course, we think it's really important, and hopefully you all do too. So we put out social media posts on the statement. It's really helpful if people can share those. We're also very happy to come and talk at any groups or events that you might have, or write blogs to your website or articles for newsletters. Just let us know if you think that anything of that sort of nature would be helpful in raising awareness of the statement. We know that the statement has a higher awareness in some sectors than others. So we're really conscious of trying to raise awareness, particularly around perhaps urban development, housing sectors of the statement. But most important is to access our good practice programme. So if you are a landowner or a land manager here today, then have a look at the website, have a look through the resources. Any questions, let us know, and we will provide you with whatever advice you might need and support, and quite often signposting actually to other people who can also help. If you're a member of the community though, you might want to bring the LRRS and in particular the Good Practice Programme and protocols to the attention of landowners that you know or engage with. And that can be a really helpful way of giving people a bit of a nudge to maybe think about things in a different way. Oh, and Lisa's popping a link to the protocols in the chat. Thanks, Lisa. Gemma, we're both providing advice to landowners at the moment, and I've had a focus on natural capital in particular this year. There's something really clear in the statement about net zero and the role of land in reaching net zero in the climate and nature crises, which is something we hear quite a lot about from landowners. And some people or organisations, of course, own land exactly for that purpose. So it's really helpful to see the role that landowners can and do play being recognised in that updated vision for the statement and in the new principle of the LRRS. And then the vision also brings in the just transition, as the Minister said, and she really kind of emphasised how important that was. Do you have any kind of thoughts on that? Any reflections on that part of it?
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, the vision does really, it's really strongly reflected in the vision and in the new principle that's been added into the statement. That just transition is a really key focus. And lots of landowners are really, really interested in the role they play in addressing our climate and nature crises. And there are some people or organisations who own land specifically for this purpose because they're interested in that climate action, carbon management. And it's really helpful to see the role that landowners can and do play being recognised here in the Land Rights and Responsibility Statement vision and in principles themselves. And important to consider as well how they can work with communities and collaborate on that. As the Minister said in her statement, it's about action with and for communities, not to them.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So thinking about that new principle, which talks about making balanced decisions, considering social, cultural, economic, and environmental impacts of decision making, and really recognizing that kind of wider role that land plays. What might that mean for people in practice, do you think?
I think people really need to consider managing land in a way that brings about multiple benefits. It's not about acting with one key purpose in mind, but thinking about how those things interact and any perhaps unintended impacts of decisions that are made. So we talk a lot about this in our protocols on good stewardship and on natural capital. And also in the work that we've done recently on community wealth building and land, which is really focused on how land is used and managed in the public sector and the benefits that communities can see from that. So these were the resources we have are really can really help people to understand what the statement and the principles mean for them in practice, and what those balanced decisions might look like.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what can the Commission do if people believe that a landowner or manager isn't following the LRRS? What's our kind of role in that?
Well, I think it's important to note that the land rights and responsibility statement and the principles really are voluntary. It is an optional thing for people to follow them, but they provide a really good framework and really good information for people. We sometimes find that people don't know about the statement or don't know exactly what's expected of them, and unfortunately on occasion we do encounter people who aren't interested in the principles and how they might apply. So we do understand it can be quite complicated, it can be difficult to understand sometimes, but you know, it's really important for people to know about the statement and about how they can use it in their own situations. So if people have concerns, if they are encountering a situation that varies from what is set out in the statement, they can get in touch with the Land Commission. And I think Lisa will pop a link to her email address and link to her Good Practice homepage in the chat there, so people know how to do that. But it's something where we can look at the situation, really gain an understanding of it, and maybe speak to other parties who are involved to get the full picture of what's going on there. And we can help those people to come together to understand what their rights and their responsibilities are and how they can work together to maybe find a solution or generate some ideas that meet different people's needs, you know, or sometimes just to help them build an understanding of each other's positions so that they can reduce the frustration and work better together going forward. And that's something really, you know, if people do want to discuss the situation or talk about the principles, the statement and how it can be put into practice, including the new vision and new principles from the RISE statement, it's something they can get in touch with us about that.
Great, thanks, Gemma. There's quite a lot of people to think about with this new updated statement, I think, and there'll be some complexities in there for people to deal with, and hopefully over time we will be updating the protocols and advice and resources just to kind of reflect the changes that are in that. I think it's also really important to say that the principles in general are broadly the same. So community engagement, community ownership, transparency, good stewardship, diversifying land ownership, those things are all the same, and that helps to provide a kind of consistency with the statement, and it just reinforces that those things are still very important. So we actually have 2 important surveys out at the moment, which might be of interest to our audience. One is for landowners, and it's about community engagement, and the other is also about community engagement, but is for communities. Lisa's going to pop those links in the chat, and if you have time after this session, it'd be great if you could fill those in. We also have a couple of blogs that people might find interesting, one on the community engagement survey and one also on updates to the LRRS, which people might find helpful. But it's time really to take some questions from our audience now. So it's great if people don't mind posting those in the Q&A box. It's at the bottom of the screen. And as I said before, you can post them anonymously if that's helpful. And if we don't get around to answering your question, then please do email it to us afterwards and we will pick it up with you by email or a phone call if that's helpful. Gemma and I are going to pick a few questions now that we think might be particularly useful to people who are attending this webinar. Gemma, do you mind kicking off and choosing a question?
Yeah, we've had an interesting question here. It's asking for clarification of what exactly is new about the revised statement.
Okay, I'm happy to take that one. So there are two core things that have changed with the new land rights and responsibility statement. The first one is a recognition of natural capital in the vision and a link to the connection to just transition in the vision as well. So it's saying that it's recognizing the changing context that we're operating in and recognizing the importance of those two things for government, but also for all of us. So a just transition, making sure that we have a fair and socially just approach to dealing with climate change, dealing with the nature crisis, biodiversity crisis, addressing all of those things. So it's really good to see those things very explicitly shared in the vision for the statement. The second thing, or the second core thing, is that there is a new principle in the vision. And the new principle in the vision talks about making balanced decisions. So decisions that consider the economic, the environmental, the social, and the cultural impact of those decisions, and recognize that all of those things are impacted on by land, and land has a role to play in all of those aspects. So those are the two core changes. It also talks, it also strengthens the transparency principle to an extent. So it talks about transparency broadly being the goal. So previously the principle talked about working towards transparency over land ownership, and now it talks about achieving transparency over land ownership. And those are the core changes really that have happened to the LRRS. Is there anything else on that, Gemma, that you think would be helpful to pick up?
Yeah, I guess on the community engagement principle, there has been a very small tweak, but an important one, I think, where the word meaningful has been added in. So there should be meaningful collaboration and community engagement made in decisions about land. And I think it is really important to reflect that that is what's looking for. And as Emma's mentioned, we have a couple of surveys out on community engagement at the moment, and it's really important for us to understand people's experiences of these things. You know, whether that's as a landowner or land manager carrying out engagement with the communities, or as a community, how do you experience engagement about land use decisions in your area? What works, what are the barriers, and what supports can be put in place to help that be done better. I also just want to pick up on the new principle that focus on broad decision making. I think it's really important to acknowledge that cultural connection that we have to land. I think that came through really well in the Minister's video there. You know, there are connections to our islands, to Gaelic, to crofting, various other cultural connections in different parts of the country, and it's really important to be mindful of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Gemma. There's another question about the Land Reform Bill consultation that's currently open. People may already know that that's live at the moment and it closes at the end of this month. So just a reminder to people to get their responses in if it's of interest. But can you tell us about what the relationship, well, where does the Land Reform Bill consultation talk about the LRRS, and what might that mean for people in the future? That's the question.
It's like you said, the consultation is open to the end of the month, and there are a few of the proposals in that bill that have come from the work that the Commission's done with around skill and concentration and our work through the Good Practice Programme on land rights and responsibilities. And one of those proposals is looking at whether there should be a statutory basis to the land rights and responsibility statement for land holdings over a certain scale. So it's an important consideration for people in a lot of areas, and I should note as well, actually, it's not just about scale, but also about that concentration of power. So consideration has been given through the consultation and through the work of the Scottish Government to how that might look in different settings, like say in a particularly rural area or on an island. Things might look a little bit different the way they do on the mainland. So it's a really important question, and if you have any views on it, please do check out the consultation and respond if you haven't already.
Great, thank you, Gemma. A question from the chat here is about real life examples without giving anything away for confidentiality, which of course is absolutely a consideration for us. Can you tell us, and I guess this is referring to real life examples about how people are thinking about perhaps that new principle and the changes to the vision, and how maybe that's going to impact, or how people are already starting to think about that in their decision making?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I think I would kind of point to our bank of case studies on our website there. They are generally focused on a particular area, but some of them do give good examples of that kind of range of decision making, engagement and decision making that's there. And obviously they're about very, very specific examples, so there's no issues there around confidentiality. We do have permission to share that information. But if there's anything specific, any specific examples or topics that you'd be interested in hearing about, then do let us know what those are, and we can signpost you.
Yeah, I also think that there's some good examples coming through on the work that we're doing on natural capital. So where we're working quite proactively with a few newer landowners to think about how they can achieve their objectives, which are perhaps around carbon sequestration and accessing carbon credits and using those to fund the work that they're doing, or maybe using those to offset hopefully unavoidable emissions elsewhere. And they're really thinking about ensuring that the way that they manage the land considers all of those different things that are important for us to use land for. So are they thinking about creating jobs in the area? Are they thinking about ways in which they can build in community benefit to the project that they're doing, ensuring that access is maintained, that they're acting with environmental integrity? All of those things we know that people are actively considering, and actually we'll have a few case studies on those coming up soon, so we'll hopefully be publishing those in the next few weeks.
Sure, I'll just pick up. We've got a comment in the chat there from Ian about food production and the land rights and responsibility statement. And I think that is something we see as being a really important part of good stewardship, and our good stewardship protocol in particular does mention that if land is particularly suited for primary use, then that should absolutely be taken into account in decision making, and whether that is agriculture and food production, forestry, flood management, there are a lot of really important considerations there, and that should absolutely be factored into decision making.
Yeah, thanks, Gemma. And I was smiling because Karen, who is one of our good practice advisors, is just replying to that comment in the chat on that exact point. Yeah, yes. Great.
Thanks very much, Karen.
Another question we've had is about casework. Can we give any examples of when we have worked with a landowner or a community to help them overcome an obstacle? And again, obviously we need to be careful about confidentiality here, but are there any examples that spring to mind for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have had various case work actually, and I'm trying to keep it confidential. We have had situations where there has been a fairly new landowner in an area and the community has had a lot of concerns. There hasn't been strong communication, but there were clearly some tensions in different changes coming about. And it was one where we got in touch with the land manager and had a chat with them and understood their position. And we went back to the community, and as a result, they did start speaking to each other and put in place some processes for sharing information so that there weren't misunderstandings, and for trying to understand each other's priorities and kind of areas of focus. So I think, yeah, we've had a few like that where it has just opened up channels of communication and given people that confidence to make approaches and ask questions, rather than kind of worrying about things and maybe making assumptions and filling in gaps with information where there is none being provided openly. So,
yeah, definitely. And actually, almost all of our casework ends up coming down to communication, I think. So, or misunderstandings that obviously can be improved by communication. So it's that communication bit is actually really important. We do have a couple of other questions, but I'm afraid we're going to have to move to the sort of final section of the webinar. So please do email us that question if you're happy to. While we're sort of wrapping up, I'll try and post a little bit of an answer to a couple of those questions in the Q&A box as well as we go along. So if you've posted that as an anonymously and you want it to stay anonymous, then hopefully I'll have a chance to give you a bit of an answer there just now. Okay, so don't forget that we have a variety of things on our website that can be helpful to people. And don't forget the Land Reform Bill consultation closes at the end of this month as well. Lisa, I'm going to hand over to you for another poll just now, if that's okay. And I'll try and type furiously away answering this question.
Okay, thanks Emma, thanks Gemma. Okay, so thank you so much for attending today, and we're really keen to get your feedback. This is the first in a series for us, and we want to shape the series to make it work for the people that attend. That's why we're running the series. So I'm just going to launch a second poll now, so we can get a little bit of information about how this was and how we can improve it for the future. So here we go. That's launched now. I'm just going to give everyone a little bit of time to undertake that for us, and thanks again. Amazing. Okay, thanks everyone for doing that. Really, really appreciate it. And as I say, if you didn't get time, you want to tell us something else, just message us and we'll make that happen. I think I'm handing back to Emma now to tell us about the very next session of Land at Lunch.
Thanks, Lisa. So the next session, as you can see, the details are on the screen, and Gemma is just going to come in and talk a little bit about that next webinar before we wrap up.
I will do, yeah, thanks. Our next Land at Lunch webinar is on Wednesday, the 2nd of November. So if you join that, you'll be joining me and my colleague James McAllan. And the topic is, how do you find out about the ownership and use of land? So that is going to cover where to find information. So if you're wondering about who owns land in your area or what their plans are for it, for example, who do you speak to, how do you contact them, and where do you look for information, that's what we'll be covering, hopefully a really practical, helpful session. And it's really about that kind of openness and transparency of ownership and use and decision making to help people understand a bit more about where they can look. So yeah, please do join us for that.
Thanks, Gemma. Thanks, Lisa. And thanks to everybody who took part and contributed today or just listened in. It's really good to get people along to these sessions. If you want to stay informed about all of our work, then please do make sure that you sign up for our mailing list. Lisa's going to pop the chat, the link for that in the chat. The wrong one, that's the right way around. Yeah, so please do that. And thank you everybody for coming today.